Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm super excited to share with all of you my first impressions of the Tom Ford Body Heat Quad. So this is one of the most iconic Tom Ford eyeshadow palettes. And so recently when I went to the cosmetic company store, I picked up 3 Tom Ford palettes. In case you're curious, the other 2 are Daydream and Pretty Baby. Definitely let me know in the comments down below if you'd be interested in reviews of those 2 quads as well. But for today, I thought I would start out with reviewing the Body Heat Quad because this is one of the most popular Tom Ford quads. It's the one he tends to keep re-releasing in different packaging. And so I was excited to finally get my hands on this quad. So if you're interested in learning more about this eyeshadow palette, then just stick around. So to start off, let's just talk about packaging. So this comes in the standard brown Tom Ford packaging. On the back, you have the name of the quad. These are made in Italy. The packaging is magnetic, so you just open it by lifting the top. And inside, we have the 4 beautiful baked shades with a decent sized mirror. The quad also comes with these little applicators that you can store here, but I personally never use these. And Body Heat is in Tom Ford's wet dry formula, so you can tell that by the fact that it's in this baked gelée formulation. So you won't see any metal pans here. Instead, you can see that the shadows themselves are a bit 3-dimensional. They kind of look like cushions. And when you touch them, they are quite hard. So if you tried Nude Dip, Honeymoon, any of those other popular quads, it'll be in the same formulation. So here we have the finger swatches. And I'll go ahead and give you guys some arm swatches too. So we have this beautiful champagne shade with a hint of pink. Then we have this reddish brown shade that's almost like a rust red. Then we have this cool toned brown shade. And then we have the deeper brown that has a little bit more reflectivity to it actually. And here's a close-up of the 4 shades. I have heard one critique of this palette is that these 2 are quite similar in depth. I will say in person they do look different. So this one over here is more of a satin finish, whereas this one has more reflectivity to it, even though it's a little bit deeper. This one also has a tiny bit of plumminess to it. Just for the sake of comparison, here it is next to Honeymoon. Honeymoon was the first Tom Ford quad that I ever tried, and it's also in that same formulation. Let me also just give you guys some swatches of Honeymoon. So we have these 2 much warmer shades, so you can definitely tell some of the tonal difference. And then here is that reddish shade. It's a little bit more cranberry in comparison to the rusty red of Body Heat. And then finally, the deepest shade is a little bit more of a satin finish similar to this shade, but the depth is much similar to this shade. In general, I would say these 2 are overall pretty similar, but Honeymoon's maybe has a tiny bit more plumminess to it. And here we have a close-up of the swatches. So first comparing the 2 champagne shades, the one in Honeymoon is more golden, whereas this one's more champagne with some pink. Comparing the 2 red shades, the one in Honeymoon's more cranberry and plummy and also has higher reflectivity, whereas the one in Body Heat is more satin and rusty brown in color. Comparing the 2 lighter browns, the one in Honeymoon is more of a bronze with an orangey tone to it, whereas the one in Body Heat is more like a cool toned taupe. Also, this one's more of a satin finish. And then comparing the deepest shades, the one in Honeymoon is more of a satin finish, has a bit more plum in it, whereas the one in Body Heat actually has some silvery shimmer in it. So without further ado, let's get these shadows on my lids. So I'm going to start actually with the deepest shade since this one has less shimmer particles than this other shade. And I'm going to just sweep this in the outer portion of my eye to start. Wow, as you can see, that's quite a deep smoky shade, so you could definitely use this for a very simple smoky eye look. And for context, this quad retails for $89, but I picked it up from the cosmetic company store for only $20. And so if you guys have a outlet near where you live that has a cosmetic company store, I would definitely recommend checking it out for Tom Ford quads. I think they have some of the best deals on these palettes. And so $89 is extremely expensive for a quad. I would say usually I would not recommend going out and buying Tom Ford quads full price, but in my experience, they usually are quite high quality and do deliver in terms of an easy eyeshadow look. Now with this shade right now, I am experiencing a little bit of patchiness. So I do have my ABH eye primer on underneath. It's not terrible, but I am trying to be a little bit careful as I'm blending this out. Really pretty shade though. Next up, I'm gonna go in with this lightest shade and just start sweeping this throughout the inner portion of the eye because I don't actually want this to be too dark of a look. Ooh, okay, this is a really pretty shade. I really like this. I kind of just want to put this all over the lid. But of course, we do want to try all of them today. So I'm going to flip the brush over now and go into this rusty shade. And I'm going to put this on the center of the lid. Now this shade doesn't have that much reflectivity to it. So if you want something with more glitz, then you might have to look for a different quad. Next up with my Sonia G Builder, I'm going to go into this taupey shade. And I'm going to put this in the outer portion of the eye, even though this actually does have a nice bit of shine to it, as you might be able to see. If you wanted to do more of a smoky eye look, I think having this shade all over the eye would be really pretty. Now I'm going to go back in with that classic crease from Sonia G and just blur out any edges. Alrighty, so there is the eyelid done. I think it's looking really nice on this side. This one, I do have some texture over here and I feel like it's not looking the best in that outer corner, but let me see if I can fix that at all by just dabbing some more shadow there. So for the lower lash line, I'm first going back in with that builder brush and I'm going to sweep this all across the center of my lower lash line. Actually bring it outwards as well. This is going to be kind of the really smoky shade. Cleaning off that brush, I'm going into the deepest shade and just sweeping this on the outer portion of the eye. And then cleaning that off again, I'm going into the lightest shade and just concentrating this on the inner part of the lower lash line. Do you want to bring some light to that area? Alrighty, so here we have the quick and easy eyeshadow look. So I'm gonna go off camera, do some eyeliner, and then be back with my initial impressions of this quad. So here we have the final look. What do you guys think? So in terms of my initial impressions of this quad, I would say that it is really quick and easy to get a really beautiful multi-dimensional look with this quad. I find that these shadows are all really beautiful and relatively easy to use. The one aspect I wasn't totally satisfied with though was using this shade over here as a transition shade. So in the future I might see how it works if I use either this guy or this guy. All four of these shades are shimmer shades, and so that can sometimes make it a little bit more difficult to use them as transitions. They do look really beautiful though when you layer them on, so it's more of a question of how good they look when they are blended out in the crease. I especially really like these two shades on the left-hand side. I think to me they were the really standout shades. The left-hand side shades just have a little bit more of that glimmer and impact to them, whereas these two over here are a little bit more satin, a little bit less interesting, don't quite bring as much to the party. Also for me, I think this sort of rusty red look is not one that I really go for a lot, so in the future I will probably more likely focus on these three shades rather than this one over here. Now for today's look, I only use these dry because realistically I don't really wet my brush and my shadows that often, but these can be used wet as well if you want to have a more pigmented, high impact finish. A couple things I will note though about formulation, and here I'll actually open my Honeymoon Quad since this is a palette I've had for 2 years now. So with this palette, I really love these three shades over here. They perform impeccably, they really blend themselves. It's extremely easy to create a beautiful Tom Ford look with them. I'm not a huge fan of this red shade though. I often have tried using this as a crease color and it just doesn't really blend out very well. It's very patchy when you use this on the crease. It's also slightly hard panned, and that happened within my first 2 uses of this palette. So nowadays when I use this palette, I use this shade with a finger kind of all over the lid, and I use this bronzy shade as a transition shade, this shade to deepen, and this shade on the lid as well. And then I often will just cut out this red shade and just focus on these 3. So I might do a similar thing with body heat. Now that is more of just a personal preference in terms of this color story, but it's something I wanted to note because of course with only 4 shadows, you want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth in terms of usage. Now, for those of you who have never tried Tom Ford quads before, you might be wondering, why is this formula so popular and why do people pay so much money for it? So let me actually try to zoom you into my eyes just to give you a better impression of this. So you can see that all of the shades are shimmers. There is no matte shadow on my lids, but it is still quite flattering. So I think what people really love about Tom Ford quads is you can create really simple but intricate multi-dimensional looks. And the shadows are quite flattering even if you have texture on your lids. The reflectivity of the shadows manages not to emphasize texture too much while adding some light to the look. For me, I don't think I would pay $89 for this sort of formulation. I do like it, but for me, it doesn't really spark a lot of fun and creativity, which is what I personally enjoy in eyeshadows the most. But certainly for half price, or in my case 75% off, I think these quads are definitely worth it and certainly one of the more unique formulas on the market. So that's it in terms of my initial impressions of the Body Heat Quad. I would love to hear in the comments down below if you guys have tried this quad, and if so, what your thoughts have been. What do you guys think about this sort of color story? Do you have a favorite Tom Ford quad? Tom Ford for me has always been a little bit of a love-hate relationship. I've kind of wanted to get into collecting them, but given the high cost and given that I'm not 100% happy with his formula, I haven't picked up a ton so far. But the cosmetic company store has started me on that journey. I now have 4 Tom Ford quads. So I'm looking forward to potentially picking up more in the future as well. But definitely let me know if you guys are interested in this sort of content. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!